Hey everybody, we are in the adrenal month of, we've got 4 videos on adrenal health, and we've talked about the function of the adrenal glands, we've talked about what affects the adrenal glands, and now we're actually going to be talking about what the adrenal glands affect, so kind of backwards. We've been talking about what stimulates the adrenal glands and what makes them go wrong. Now we're going to talk about the consequences of those adrenal glands going wrong. What does that do? Okay, and so one of my favorite and least favorite books is actually written by Robert Sapolsky, I think it is his name, and it's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And one of the reasons, so one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite books is because he totally nerds out on every system of the body and how it reacts to cortisol and how basically cortisol rots the entire body, the soul and everything of the body. And he uses he uses research to prove it all. And so one of the reasons why it's my least favorite is because I read the whole book completely depressed, expecting that surely next chapter he's going to teach me how to resolve this. And then the book just ends. And there's never here's how you fix this. Yes. So, but it's a wonderful book, especially if you need some nighttime reading you have some insomnia and want to go to sleep. It's pretty boring, but it's wonderfully boring in the sense that he really dives into the science behind it. So if you, like me in the beginning of transitioning into a functional medicine doctor, is kind of a skeptic about, the adrenal glands are so important, read the book and you will find out exactly how every single system of the body is rotted by cortisol. So hopefully that's a good intro to this video of what all can completely go wrong with cortisol. Yeah, now that your adrenals are on fire from learning that.
Thinking about it. Okay.
And so we're going to talk about several things we've got our list. And so we're going to talk about several things that the adrenal glands affect. Even though it can affect everything in the entire body, we've kind of picked our top 5. And our first one in the top 5 is it affects your energy levels or your fatigue levels, and it affects your brain fog or your brain function. So Aubrey, you want to take off with that one or what?
You can.
Okay, great. So I'll keep talking then. You know I can talk forever.
I'll come in. Love them.
So the adrenal glands, the reason why they contribute to fatigue and brain fog is because the adrenal glands are basically the time clock of your body. So if we put you, they've done this study actually, if we put you in a room with solid light and no shadow, no light, no moon, no sun or anything, you will still generally follow about a 24-hour time clock. They actually showed, I think the research showed that you actually went to a 25-hour time clock, which is a little interesting. You don't get that extra hour per day. But anyway, so your adrenal glands are responsible for knowing about what time of the day it is. So if we put you in that room and we ask you, what time is it? Then you could probably pick about what time of the day it is. Now, obviously, if you stayed in that room for too long, it would throw everything off. So the reason why the adrenal glands contribute to fatigue is because the adrenal glands release cortisol, as Aubrey said in the first or second video. You're supposed to be releasing cortisol even before you awake. Right. So the cortisol is kind of the shock the body awake. And then after you awake, within 30 minutes, it's supposed to reach, what did you say, 200%?
200%.
Yeah. And so that is the highest it reaches all day long. After that 30 minutes or maybe an hour after, whatever it is.
60 minutes.
60 minutes, yeah. Then it's really just falling the rest of the day. It's not a sharp fall. It's just a slow fall.
It's a nice little bell curve.
Yep.
Kind of like that.
And then in the evening, obviously, is when it's the lowest, and that's when you go to sleep, and then you repeat the whole process. So if your cortisol levels mismatch the environment at any point, then you have fatigue. Right. So one of the things I love to talk about is mismatch of environment to hormones. So, for example, if a lion jumps out in a trail and you're walking down it, that is an immediate kind of euphoric event of, oh my God, I'm going to die. It's the jumping out of an airplane adrenaline rush of, oh my gosh, this feels great because I'm in a intense situation and I've got the hormones to match it. Now, if you take a totally different environment, if you take us sitting on the couch and we get the same hormonal surge as if a lion did jump out, but you're sitting on a couch calm, it's a very uncomfortable sensation, and that's basically a panic attack. Right. A panic attack is a mismatch of hormones to the environment. If you're sitting in a bed and your heart is pounding, it's a very disrupting sensation.
Right. In a social situation, anything like that, right? Social anxiety is a perfect example of that. You're with people, right? Essentially social interaction that's supposed to make you feel good and connected. But if you're sitting there internally panicking and freaking out, that's that mismatch. And that's why people commonly have panic attacks when they're around other people too.
Correct. So the mismatch of environment, if we carry that same message over to the cortisol, so if you are waking up in the morning and your cortisol is supposed to be 200% of what it normally is, but it's not, then you have a mismatch of environment. And so usually you're tired in the morning, and then as you go throughout the day, your adrenal glands have been trying to keep up all day long, and then you're actually releasing too much cortisol by the time the evening hits, and that's when people get their second win, and that's when they feel the best, is between 4 and 8 p.m. people feel their best, and then they're exhausted but can't go to sleep at night.
Right.
And then even if they do go to sleep at night, they'll frequently wake up, they'll be restless, and we kind of call that wired and tired. You're throughout the day, you're wired, you're kind of ready to go mentally, but physically you don't actually have the energy to do that. And so that's that mismatch of environment. The cortisol is not right with the time of the day, and that leads to energy dysfunction.
And that's why it's really important to follow your circadian rhythm, right? And so that's making sure that it's different for everyone, but most people have a similar circadian rhythm. You're supposed to wake up with the sunrise and start to wind down with the sunfall, right? Or the
Sunfall, that's a new one.
The sunset.
The sun just falls out of the sky.
With the sunset, right?
Yes.
And then go to bed. So when you're commonly stressed out or at finals or, and working really late and you're pushing your adrenals, like you have to think about it. When you're in stress too, those adrenal hormones are firing even more. So now you're affecting high cortisol throughout the evening time and the nighttime. That's why working late is really bad for you as well. And pushing yourself at
Says the one who worked late yesterday.
I know.
Her, not me this time.
I know.
Her.
Okay, but, right? Or like 10, 11, midnight studying and being like, I'm just going to push this for now and not do it tomorrow. So we're seeing that you can do, because now you're having that mismatch of hormones, right? And now your whole next day is going to be affected as well.
Yep.
So you have to match that circadian rhythm, and it slightly changes for people, but generally sunrise and sunfall.
And it's one of the reasons we get more tired in the wintertime when the sun falls earlier in the evening. You get tired sooner. That's part of that circadian rhythm. That's kind of supposed to happen. We could talk a lot about that, but we're going to go ahead and move into our second one, because I'm sure you're dying to know. The second one is weight loss, and adrenal glands heavily affect the weight loss hormones and just the ability to lose weight or inability to lose weight or gain weight inappropriately. Gosh, that breaks my heart when people are like, I'm eating so clean and I'm still gaining weight.
Like 10 pounds or something.
It's miserable.
And it's stressors too, right? And I mean, shamelessly, we'll always talk about ourselves too, just to relate, but I'm that kind of person too. My stress response is to gain weight immediately. And you see a lot of women who do that too, and they eat right, or they, or they're over exercising, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But cortisol, when it's constantly elevated, it makes you store fat. It's the fat storing hormone, basically. Yes. So if you're constantly in a fight or flight state, your cortisol is going to keep storing fat, and you're not going to be able to use it properly, and then you're not going to be able to use it or lose it.
Another thing about cortisol and weight gain is that cortisol does not make you gain weight in the sexy places. Like, it's not going to put it in your boobs and butt.
Belly,
it's
face.
going to put it in your belly, your face, and that little hump in the back of your neck. It's going to make you have the little hump back. So if that's where you look at your primary weight sources, then you know that at least a portion of your issue is actually hormones. Because so let's just say you're in a weight gain hormonal balance. Based on your hormones, your hormone balance is where you're going to put that weight.
Right.
So let's say you're eating too many calories, but your hormones are actually perfectly balanced. Then if you're a female, you're going to put it in boobs and butt and thighs.
Right.
Whereas if you're a male, you're going to put it in the belly.
Right.
Now, if you take a menopausal woman, and same thing, you have them on a where they're eating too many calories, but their hormones are balanced for menopause, meaning they have no estrogen, progesterone, and they have a little bit of testosterone. They actually gain weight like a man because of hormones. So that's why you'll see kind of elderly ladies with a little pooch of a belly, not so much boobs and butt anymore, because the main hormone is testosterone. So if you take anyone and put them in a chronically stressed state and give them excessive calories, then they will put it in the non-sexy places, the neck, the face, and the belly.
Every female patient I've had that has been on hormones commonly says they get the puffy face, and you know what you're talking about, right? Their face gets puffy, they get a belly that they can't lose, and then
you mean steroids, not hormones?
Or steroids, sorry. That's what I meant.
Because we do a lot of hormone replacement. That's not what happens.
No, you get
steroids.
You feel great on hormone replacement. Sorry, no, cortisone, things like that.
Yes.
Or any type of steroids that kind of perpetuate that, right? And so that's an inappropriate amount of hormones too in your body. It's needed at the time, but they always complain about those same areas that you're talking about.
Not sexy.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, to some people, right, to each their own, but.
So third on our list is, looks like meal.
Mood.
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 So adrenal glands affect your mood and vice versa. So in the
Right.
first couple of videos, we really talked about how your perception of stressors and your stress affects the adrenal glands. And then this is the feed forward cycle of, as the adrenal glands get off, they start frying your mood.
Right.
And so one of the things we're taught in med school, even conventional medical school, is that if the adrenal glands are off, typically we talk about this in Lowe's, is you get those stones, bones, groans, and moans or something like that. And the moans is kind of the, like, I'm apathetic, I'm depressed, I have no motivation for life, I've lost that vigor. And that's another mismatch of hormones, is the cortisol is supposed to rise during stressful times, it's supposed to fall during not. But when it's constantly high all day long, all night, then that's when you get in this like just flat appearance and flat situation. So, and that's one of the big reasons why depression, in my opinion, why depression and anxiety go hand in hand, is because the adrenal glands are releasing too much cortisol. That's flattening the mood and just making you apathetic, where you have no luster for life. But at the same time, remember in one of our other videos, we talked about Paul Revere being the British are coming. So with the cortisol being so high, it's also saying adrenaline's coming, adrenaline's coming. So even the smallest amount of regular adrenaline pushes you into anxiety. And then of course the anxiety can spin into panic attacks.
Right. It depends on what type of like adrenal stage of dysfunction you're at, right? So like if you're in stage 3 to where you're like overproducing.
There's only 4
sorry,
stages.
yeah. Or you're between basically stage 2 and 3 where you're overproducing so much. And we see these patients who come in and they're like this and they're talking like this and they're constantly panicking. They're like, I don't know why. And then you're just like, okay. And you want to hug them and be like, take a breath, right?
Right.
That's the stage before burnout.
Yeah.
That's the stage where your body's fighting, when you're anxious about everything and you're like, I'm crying at this, my spouse is making me frustrated, but I don't even know why. Looking at him makes me sick. I didn't mean to point to you.
Yeah.
Looking at my boss makes me sick. Like you have all these like little triggers, or like my kid is just asking me for dinner and I flipped out.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have the burnout stage where it's y'all know this, where you're so burnt out, where you like, I did this yesterday, where you sit in a car and you just stare. Right? Or someone calls me and you're like, hey, how's it? Yeah, I can't talk.
Just not functioning.
Yeah. And y'all know that feeling from a long day of work, a long day of even emotional exhaustion, a fight with somebody, a partner, a friend, whoever it may be. You just feel drained and like the life has been sucked out of you. So people in constant adrenal fatigue and chronic adrenal exhaustion, they sit there and you can tell like everything has been taken away. They're almost just like a shell of a human, and they don't want to feel that way, obviously, but they don't know how to get out of it.
Right.
A little depressing, but
yeah, well, it's
know,
true. And so mental illness is heavily related to adrenal dysfunction. It may not be the only cause of your mental illness, but it's certainly one of those puppeteer hormones that, you don't have enough serotonin. Well, maybe one of the reasons because you have too much cortisol, which is the puppeteer hormone that's affecting your serotonin, your epinephrine, your other neurotransmitters. So we could talk all day about this stuff, but moving on to the next one is sleep. Sleep is a big one, and sleep is both a backwards and forwards thing in the sense that poor sleep affects the adrenals. We kind of talked about that already, or maybe we didn't. We wanted to. But then as the adrenal glands get off, then it starts affecting the sleep. And then as the sleep gets affected, then it affects the adrenals, and back and forth and back and forth.
You'll see that when you're waking up every 2 hours at night. That's a huge thing. It's a huge dysregulation. That's your adrenals. Honestly, I feel like they don't know what to do with the cortisol.
Right.
They don't know, because it's supposed to be this nice kind of even flow throughout the night. That's when we'll commonly like supplement for it and help adrenals. And be like, let's try this supplement to help calm down the adrenal glands and people get better sleep. That's the anxious.
Because you can have poor sleep at both too high cortisol and too low cortisol. Right. One of my early patients, she had to take 2 Ambien at night just to get to sleep. And so we did her adrenal testing, and her cortisol was literally 0 at night before bedtime, even before taking the Ambien. And that was a light bulb moment for me of like, wow, that's so interesting. You would think that if her cortisol obviously wasn't 0, it was just unregistered by the test, because remember, 0 is dead. And so the cortisol was so low, but she still couldn't sleep. So that was an early message to me that any hormone out of balance, whether too low or too high, can cause symptoms of that problem. So so if your sleep is affected, make sure you're taking care of your adrenals, and then as you take care of your adrenals, it will take care of your sleep, vice versa. The big thing with sleep and adrenals is you gotta wear blue blockers. If you ever have light at night, looking at your phone, looking at a computer, looking at your TV, one of the first things to do is, of course, put on blue blockers to block the blue light so that it stops activating your adrenal glands. But cold and dark is the ways to get to sleep, and of course having good hygiene.
Yeah, like under 68 degrees and sleeping. And your blue blockers better be ugly.
Yeah.
They better be orange and thick and make you look like a fool.
Agreed. Like Bono.
Yeah.
More orange, not blue.
Yeah.
Okay, and then last but not least in the adrenal world is, of course, that the adrenal glands both trigger autoimmunity by themselves. They trigger autoimmunity, but they also can, initiate autoimmunity, but they can also be the main source of a flare. Right. So if you have an autoimmune condition, this probably is not that surprising to you. Maybe it's kind of connecting some dots, but if you ever have a stressful situation, that could have nothing to do with your autoimmune condition of, oh, someone died or I almost got in a car crash or something, and your adrenal glands spike. All of a sudden you wake up the next morning with joint pain or a rash or gut disruption or whatever it may be, or say you worked too many hours, you all of a sudden have a gut flare, even though you didn't even eat any of your trigger foods or do any of your trigger behaviors. You still had the flare. So the adrenal glands have a difficult role in the sense that too much cortisol it kind of overstimulates the immune system. This is one of the things that's a little hard to understand, hard to explain even for myself, is that cortisol, when it's down the right balance, has the right stimulus on the immune system, because cortisol does stimulate the immune system. But at the same time, it's got the right regulation, like not too much, not too high as far as a balance. If cortisol starts going too high, you would think that, it would be like we use steroids for suppressing the immune system. So when you have high cortisol, which is basically steroids, you would think it would suppress the immune system. But when you naturally produce too much cortisol, it's almost like it's a confusion of the immune system. Yeah. It's not really a suppression. It's not really a stimulus. It says, go fight something. We're not sure what you should fight. We're stressed. Like there's something going on. Just go fight something. And that's one of the beliefs as to why your own cortisol can stimulate an autoimmune flare. But if we give you prednisone, it actually suppresses an autoimmune flare. That part's always a little confusing, but it's what we see in reality, right, whether we can explain it or not.
Right.
So, and then of course the way the adrenal glands can trigger autoimmunity, or I don't want to use trigger, I want to use initiate autoimmunity, is because the adrenal glands, as we talked about in other videos, it releases cortisol. Cortisol stimulates yeast and candida and fungus overgrowth in the bowels, as well as other bacterial imbalances. And then that is one of the things that correlates directly to autoimmunity through leaky gut and stuff. So not only can the adrenal glands initiate an autoimmune condition, but it's also the main one responsible for flares and triggers.
Agreed. Stress is the amplifier.
Yeah,
That's it. So just think about that, If there's any issue that you have, whether you have to think where your hot spot is. Is your hot spot gastrointestinal, or do you get gas or bloating or abdominal pain, or, you can't pass a bowel movement, right? Constipation, or if you get nauseous, things like that, and you're stressed, you're going to see it manifest in that area too, right? I've seen stress hives cover people's bodies, right? So if skin expression is your stress, kind of like high stress is going to make that worse, obviously. So just think about what it is. And a lot of the times it's people's mood too. So if you're constantly anxious or sad, or, even happy, I guess, but stress will amplify it.
Well, just to wrap that up, so the main thing that is cortisol affects every part of the body, whether it's your memory, your mood, your hormones, everything. And if you want to know all about the things that it mortifies the body or rots the body, as you can read Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It's a fascinating, fun book. And then the top 5 things we talked about is fatigue and brain fog, inability to lose weight, poor mood, poor sleep, and of course autoimmune triggers. Right. And this wraps up our video, so feel free to like our channel, subscribe, and you'll get notifications for our future videos.
Cool. Hit the bell. Bye guys.